Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is my third reading from my book, The Wanderer Scorned, and this is the second part of chapter 1. My mother named me Cain, meaning acquired, for she said I have acquired a man with the help of Yahweh. For my parents, the years of my childhood were sweeter than those that had come before. My mother doted on me, her firstborn, seeming to forget what she had been through to bring me into the world. We were always busy with many tasks, but everything felt like a game to me. I rarely disobeyed, having no cause to, as I had my parents' attention most of the time. I didn't realise that true happiness rarely graced their faces during that time, for I knew no different. We settled in a cave, not a quarter day's walk from the Kaba River, which lay between the two great ones and joined them together. There were steep drops down to faster waters at points along the river, yet in other areas it was flat and regularly flooded, nurturing the ground with the water of life and providing good soil for the small crops that my father began to plant. It was hard labour moving water around when the river wasn't flooding. The mist that used to cover the ground in the mornings had not appeared since the banishment, and it rarely rained. Fortunately, the valley was populated with trees suitable for food, and grapevines grew near the river's edge. As a child, I enjoyed climbing the trees to pick olives, figs and dates, and watching my father tend the vines. I was fascinated by the river, and helping my mother collect water did not feel like a chore. I saw it as an opportunity to build up my strength so I could one day be as tall and strong as my father. From the higher ground that our cave nestled into, we could see the winding Tigris far off in the east, but we never went that way, fearing the massive mountains on the eastern side that held animals of great size and strength. Occasionally we would catch glimpses of the giant lizards that my father called tannin as they meandered from the mountains to water at the Tigris, but they never crossed the river or came near our land. We saw no predators in those early years of my life. One day, my father ran back to our cave with excitement on his face. "I found a flock of animals, a smaller variety than the ones I named cattle in the garden," he said to my mother. "They have multiplied beyond that ridge to the north. I believe we could tame them, keep them for milk, clothing, perhaps meat." My mother grimaced slightly, but did not disagree. Before the banishment, only plants had been permitted for food. After the first death, when Yahweh slew a creature to provide clothing for their nakedness, my parents had occasionally eaten animals when plant life was scarce. Graceful creatures such as the many-horned and slender-horned deer frequented the woods near our home, but we had not yet come across anything we could tame. Out of respect for the lifeblood of the creatures and our responsibility to care for them, any hunting trips were rare. Skins acquired from the hunt were always carefully preserved for bedding or clothing, and bladders were fashioned into water carriers. I was 8 years old at this time and ready for an adventure, so I begged my father to take me on the trip north. He agreed. As we set out, we took water skins slung over our shoulders, along with some long branches we had sharpened at one end in case of trouble. My father and I had been walking for half a day, enjoying the rare respite from work, when we found a fallen tree in the middle of the plain. Its roots were unearthed, some even pointing up to the sky, and its branches were scattered over the ground. My father gave me a lift, and I climbed onto its trunk, skittering along its length until I reached the end where the branches began and some of the leaves were still green. I climbed through those great branches, devising a den and imagining adventures. During this time, my father sat on the ground and stared at the tree. At first, I thought he was resting from the walk, but he looked sad after a while, as if something about the fallen tree was significant. "What of it, Abba? Come join me in the game," I implored him. He didn't answer directly, for his mind was in another place. Eventually, though, he seemed to recall I was there, and he replied, "The great tree that was pleasant to the sight of Elohim falls. It's another sign of our sin, Cain," he said, shaking his head. "This tree would not have fallen if we had not taken the fruit of another like it. Because of us, this earth is destined to decay and destruction." "But Abba, look," I said, pointing to the ground beneath the roots where I had found a colony of beetles. "There's new life here." He came round to where I was sitting and observed it. My father smiled then, crouching beside me and letting a beetle run under his palm. "You are right, son of Adam. Perhaps the earth shall show the grace of Elohim and bring forth new life, even where we have destroyed it. The next day we found the small flock of cattle, and we called them sheep. They were still grazing where my father had seen them, 8 ewes and a ram. It was the wrong time of year for lambs, which was another grace, for we would have struggled to move them with young in tow. We walked around the sheep, trying to encourage them into place with our sticks. It didn't work. Many years later, my brother Havel would laugh at our recounting of this tale, how we had tried for the whole afternoon to call the flock to order, not knowing how to control them as they scattered in all directions at every approach. As night fell, we found a glade where moss and ferns covered the ground in musty patches, and a stream trickled fresh water down from the northern mountains. I refilled our water skins and dipped my head in the refreshing flow. Then I splashed some at my father, who laughed and chased me around the glade, splashing me in turn. As we fell onto the soft moss in a fit of humour, a noise from the thicket startled us. My father grabbed me around the waist and drew me behind a rock, putting a finger to his lips. We crouched there, waiting to see what would emerge. A small creature, half my size, crept out, making a slight clicking noise. Another followed it. They looked around, scanning the water's edge for predators. Their scaled bodies were perched on 2 legs, with claws at their feet like a bird. The light scruff of feathers jutted from their necks, though the rest of their skin was smooth like a lizard. They each had pointed teeth that looked suited to eating smaller animals, though they would surely take a man's arm if provoked. As they scanned the area, their eyes swept over us but did not register our presence. We didn't move a muscle, scared that if we did they would spot us immediately. They proceeded to drink at the stream, then crossed it, disappearing into the undergrowth on the other side. We exhaled together. "Let's make our bed on that raised area, in case other visitors come for a drink in the night," my father said. We climbed onto the ledge that jutted out over the stream and found more soft moss where we could lie. "There were no creatures like that in the garden," Abba murmured, as I crawled into his outstretched arms. Oblivious to his fear, I felt deep contentment as he wrapped his cloak around us both. In mere moments I was sound asleep, exhausted from the day of unsuccessful sheep herding and sure of safety in my Abba's arms.